Whenever you come out to play for sports week, all of you handsome, we look very handsome, very beautiful, smiling, shining, fresh, right? I want to see you just like that whenever you come to chapel, classroom, and study. Let's forget for a moment about all those excitements and let's see how and what the Lord has for us this morning to refresh our soul. I've been studying the missionary journeys of Apostle Paul. His 3 missionary journeys and also the 4th missionary journeys and how he ended up finally in the Mamertine dungeon in Rome. How committed he was, fearless he was in preaching the gospel, sponsoring himself by tent making and his team, how he suffered, how he was stoned, thinking and leaving him thinking that he was dead. How often he was beaten, opposed, and imprisoned, shipwrecked. And all through his ministry of teaching and preaching the non-negotiable gospel truth. Opposition from false teachers trying to twist the truth of the gospel, often forsaken by his friends and companions. He finally landed in the dungeon, and that's when he wrote his last letter to Timothy, which we call 2 Timothy. As you read the 2 Timothy, you will be able to feel the pulse of the apostle. And I was doing that, and I was reading the very famous statement that he wrote about himself in the 2 Timothy somewhere in chapter 4. Yes, in verse 7, I have fought the good fight. I have won the race. I have kept the faith. And if you look at reading, especially the last chapter of that book, Paul wrote to Timothy saying this, I charge you, therefore, before God and Lord Jesus Christ, and what he is charging. If you look at in verse 2, preach the word, be ready in season and out of season. Convince, rebuke, exhort with all long-suffering and teaching. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers, and they will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside of fables. But you be watchful in all things, endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist, fulfill your ministry. As for me, that's what basically Paul is saying in verse 6, I am already being poured out as a drink offering. And the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought the good fight, I have run the race, and I have kept the faith. Verse 9, if you continue reading that, be diligent to come to me quickly. For Demas has forsaken me, having loved this present world, and has departed for Thessalonica. Crescens for Galatia, Titus for Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is useful to me for ministry. And Tychicus I have sent to Ephesus. Bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas when you come, and books, especially the parchment. Alexander the coppersmith did me much harm. May the Lord repay him according to his word. You must also beware of him, for he has greatly resisted our words. At my first defense, no one stood with me, but all forsook me. May it not be charged against them. But he's encouraged, in spite of all these things, because he wrote in verse 17, but the Lord stood with me and strengthened me, so that the message might be preached fully through me, and that all the Gentiles might hear. Also I was delivered out of the mouth of lions. How the Lord has blessed him throughout his ministry, delivering him from all dangers and difficult situations of his ministry. As you look at and study the ministry of Apostle Paul throughout his missionary journeys, and also his teachings in different places, how committed he was, how much he suffered, and finally he was delivered and he was put into the dungeon, the prison, which is called Mamertine prison. Once you are in that prison, that means you are not going to be delivered from there. You are only waiting for execution. It is not like the house arrest when Paul was in Rome for 2 years. In Rome, you know, Paul was in the house arrest in Caesarea, pending his trial for 2 years. Then he appealed to Rome and he was sent to Rome, and he was there under house arrest for 2 years. Another 2 years there. It was all house arrest, but this time he was in Mamertine dungeon, only waiting. The day he would be lifted is his last day. He understands. He knows that very well. That's why he says, I am being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought a good fight. I have finished race. I have kept my faith. He's not worried. He's not worried about the fact of the situation that he will be executed. He's not worried about it. He's not even worried about the fact that all his friends and companions have left him. He said, only Luke is with me. And of course, some of them left not the faith, but they left for some other work. And others have left their faith. And not only leaving the faith, but the gospel truth, they even oppose and trying to stop the spread of the gospel. That's why he says, Alexander the coppersmith did me much harm. May the Lord repay him according to his word. In his trial, which is not recorded in the New Testament, for this time, the trial before standing before Felix and Agrippa, we know that Luke recorded those things very well. But this trial before Nero, because he appealed from Caesarea to Nero, that's why he was sent to Rome, and he stood before the emperor. And this is what Paul wrote to Timothy, at my first defense, no one stood with me. All forsook me. We know Paul is feeling lonely. He feels deserted. And also, he feels cold. He told Timothy to bring his warm clothes. The cloth that I left in Carpus at Troas, when you come there, bring that with me. You know, this dungeon is still today. You can visit there as a tourist. It's open to the tourists. It's like a well. It's like a cell, dark inside. I don't know how Paul managed to write this letter in his last letter. Peter was there. Peter was there and was executed. Now Paul is there in waiting for execution. But before that, he was able to write this letter. Come to me quickly, Timothy. He's feeling lonely, he's feeling cold, he's feeling deserted, but he's not worried much about all those things. He's worried about one thing: how the non-negotiable gospel truth will be handed down, transmitted to the generations to come. That was his story. That was his concern. I would like to just entitle my topic here as the transmission of the non-negotiables. And that's what Paul is concerned about here. That's what Paul is exhorting and telling Timothy to preach the word of God. Do the work of evangelist. Exhort, rebuke, convince in season, out of season. And as I look at the church history, listen to this, in every crucial time of the church, throughout the church history, God raised a bunch of great people, great theologians, great Christian thinkers, philosophers, martyrs, apologists. The apostolic days, the first 100 years, the first century, it is known as the apostolic days. And Paul was one of the main persons there, along with other apostles there, preaching the non-negotiable gospel truth. And how much Paul is concerned about that. He wrote to the Galatians, even if we preach another gospel other than the gospel that we had preached earlier to you, and even if angel preach another gospel to you, let him be accursed. You see the seriousness that Paul is thinking and Paul is committed to. The non-negotiable gospel truth for which he is committed, for which he is concerned and worried about how that non-negotiables would be transmitted in the generations to come. And Paul is concerned about it. He wrote to the Galatians, how quickly they have to turn away from the gospel truth. Don't believe in any gospel truth other than the truth that I have preached to you in the beginning. And that's what he has been preaching. That's what he has been holding. That's what he stood for. And that's what he's concerned about. How, after his death, his time is coming near. And how, you see, Timothy, I'm concerned about this, how this will be handed down to generations. And God used, during this crucial time of the spreading of the gospel seed all over the Roman Empire, Paul was very much instrumental to it. We know all about it. The next 350 years was crucial too, without any gain. From the first century, then the next 2.5 or 3 centuries without any gain. That was still crucial because the church that apostles planted, the seed of the church were growing, but it was still tender and young, and it can be easily trampled and destroyed by false teachers. Paul knew it, and Paul is concerned about it, and in fact, God knew it. So God raised a bunch of great people. That's my thought that's running in my heart, in my mind these days. How many great people that God raised in those days? During that next 3 centuries, up to 450 AD. You can think of those church fathers we're talking about. the early church fathers, the later church fathers, the Clement of Rome, Clement of Alexandria, Justin Martyr, Origen, Tertullian, Polycarp, Irenaeus, Athanasius, Augustine, Jerome, Ambrose of Milan, John Chrysostom. Remember if you study the three Cappadocian fathers, Basil the Great, his brother, the Gregory of Nyssa, and their friend, Gregory of Nazianzus, all three of them, all living together in the region called Cappadocia. They are known as Cappadocian fathers. And I was wondering, how come God raised all these great people, great thinkers and theologians at a time together? And don't think that these people are not smart people. They live in ancient times, but don't think that we are smarter than these people. They are smart. Remember Augustine? If you know and you heard about, you know about Augustine. Such a great theologian the history of mankind has ever produced, church history has ever produced, the greatest theologian ever after Apostle. If you know, one of his writings, Confession, that's his own autobiography, one of the best books, and his book, Civitate Dei, the City of God, written in Latin, that is among the top 10 best books ever in the history of mankind. Well, how you rank the top 10 books, the best books, of course it's a debate, but you will see. You will see the book of Augustine, the City of God, among top 10 in most of the list of people. Such a wonderful writings, theology, great theologian. When the canon of the New Testament was, confirmed in the Council of Carthage in 397 AD, that is on the basis of the homework done by Augustine and his team in the synod, in series of meetings in the Synod of People in 393, 4 years before. And such a great people because God raised these people because it was necessary in order to keep the church at the right direction. So that the church might not be, drowned in the midst of the false teachings. That's what Paul was concerned about. Alexander, the coppersmith, how much harm he has done. He has left. Not only that, he has left. He's trying to twist the gospel truth. He is trying to hinder the gospel truth. And Paul is concerned about that. And this is the crucial time in the church history, the first century, where the apostles were, and the next 3 or so centuries where the church fathers, the early church fathers, and later church fathers. You see, if you look at the history of the church and history of word, you look at it, you will see not a single great thinkers occurred, raised during the next 1,120 years. That's the era in the church history, in the history of mankind, in the world history, which is called Middle Ages or the Dark Ages. It's called Dark Ages because it was dark. Those people, these kind of people were not there. In all fields, whether it be in literature, whether it be in science, whether it be in philosophy, whether it is in theology, not a single great persons like one of these church fathers and other church fathers. Well, no one was there. And of course, few were there, but not to the rank, in no way to the rank of the church fathers in those days. Like Thomas Aquinas, you know the name, Anselm of Canterbury. Those are some people, theologians that you can, thinkers that you can mention, you can think of during the 1,200 long years of history. And you know, that's when the church became corrupted. That's when the church, under the leadership of what is called the Roman Catholic Church, you know, Roman Catholic Church by that time, before the reformers was about to come, people did not, the church leaders, they don't know Latin anymore. Only few leaders they know Latin. Latin was, the Bible was in Latin. Jerome's Bible, Latin was there. And this Latin Bible had been in use for about 1,000 years. For even more than 1,000 years. It was heavily used in churches. But by the time when the Renaissance period comes, you know, people have forgotten Latin. People do not know Latin anymore. So in the church, the leaders were reading from the Latin Bible without knowing the meaning. You see the condition. And in the same way, naturally, as we can understand, the non-negotiable gospel truth was negotiated compromised. The church authority they were depending heavily on the authority of the Roman Catholic Church, the tradition of the Roman Catholic Church, not on the authority of the Bible. The Roman Catholic Church would say, yes, we believe in the Bible, we believe in the authority of the Bible, but church has the same authority with the Bible. Or sometimes church has higher authority over the Bible. The tradition has been so powerful. The church has been so powerful during that time. How corrupted that church was. Roman Catholic Church. They started selling, you know, what do you call, just forget the name, indulgence, right? The certificates. You know, you buy the certificate, if you sin, you buy the certificate, and give money, and your sin is forgiven, right? They say that's how the church, the St. Peter Church in Rome was built with those money. Corrupted, adulterated. The non-negotiable gospel truth was not transferred, not transmitted properly. And church was going through a hard time, a crucial time. That is when God raised a bunch of great people again who are called reformers. And you know, you study about reformers, those great theologians, Martin Luther, John Calvin, Philip Melanchthon, Albert Zwingli, William Tyndale, John Wycliffe, John Knox, Erasmus, those reformers, bunch of great people again were raised by God, so that the non-negotiable truth will be confirmed again there and is handed down to the next generation. And not very long after the Reformation era, you see, the liberalism comes out. And of course, so popular and so smart people who are atheists, skeptics, many of them came in the modern time and postmodernism. And you see, if you look at and listen to like what they call Richard Dawkins, you know, well-known Christian living and Christopher Hitchens. If you listen to their debate, and you see they are debating with the Christian apologists and leaders, listen to that. They are indeed very smart. God raised smart people. God raised smart people and theologians to encounter them as well. Okay? And in fact, we have many great theologians in order to keep the non-negotiable truths to transmit in the generations to come. Liberalism, which is a very general name for all kinds of false teachings, right? There's no truth as such. That's very common teachings today. There's no truth as such. Whatever truth you talk about, that is a relative truth. That's true for you, not true for me. Whatever you say that's true, he holds the truth, that truth is for him, not for me. Relative truth. It's very common, very popular. God also raised great thinkers, smart people, apologists, great theologians to counter those false teachings during this time. You know, you have great thinkers and apologists, evangelists, martyrs, Lewis Perry Jeffrey, J. Baker, C.S. Lewis, Jonathan Edwards, all great theologians. Francis Schaeffer, F.F. Bruce, the evangelist Billy Graham. If you know R.C. Sproul from Presbyterian, he died about 10 years ago. Such a wonderful teacher, holding the non-negotiable truth. John MacArthur, who recently died, such a man. God raised such a people. And even, the writer and apologist, Norman Geisler, such a wonderful man. Frank Turek, who is still working very hard as an apologist. William Lane Craig, which people consider the number one apologist in the world today. God raised also a bunch of people like these smart thinkers, theologians, who hold the non-negotiable gospel truth. And we are living in this era where all kinds of liberalism, the teachings of liberalism, skeptics, atheists, someone said, we try to teach our children in Sunday school, and we try to groom them teaching the non-negotiable truths, the biblical truths, when they go to secular colleges, universities. They go to those places where their teachings are full of atheism, skepticism, right? We are today in this kind of world. And you and I are responsible to transmit the non-negotiable gospel to the generations to come. And God is giving that responsibility to you and me. Remember that we are standing today for the non-negotiable truths. Never compromise it. You hold what you know and believe is true. Never be wavered by the false teachings by smart people today. Do not teach the teaching of your church and church tradition. Do not teach and preach what your church says. Do not teach and preach what your denomination says. That's the problem with the Roman Catholic Church. Preach the word of God. That's what Paul says to Timothy in 2 Timothy. Rebuke, convince, preach in season and out of season. Paul is worried about it. You know, how we need to stand for the non-negotiable truths, not for our church tradition. I say from time to time, I say this and I tell this. I will be able to die for the gospel truth. I will be able to die for my faith, for Christ's sake. But I'm not ready to die. I'm not willing to die. And I will not be able to die for the non-Baptists. So, I don't have anything against Baptists. I'm from the Baptist church. But that's not what I preach. You know, sometimes when I was told to teach Baptist distinctives, well, I believe what is there written in Baptist distinctives, I believe that's true, but I'm not comfortable to teach as Baptist distinctives. What I will teach, and what I will stand, and what I will preach is the non-negotiable truth, the gospel truth, biblical truth. God bless you. Thank you, Lord, for this encouragement from your servant, Apostle Paul. Even as he encourages